My name is Jeremy Smith, and I'm the founder of Citadel Development Services. And our first project to work with shipping containers was the pitch here in Austin, Texas. You know, we had the assurance that within a really tight tolerance, every container was going to be the same. And why that was important for this project is that you know, there was a lot of fabrication outside of what Falcon was doing for the project. There was staircases, there was a lot of structural steel, there was other screening elements that were being fabricated in a different city. And so, you know, you had the assurance that, okay, if this component was going to fit in this container, well, it would also fit in this other container. The other thing too was, you know, the speed at which some of the construction could be done while the site was being prepared. The dirt work, the utilities, all that for the site was going on at the same time. So that just really expedited, you know, versus a conventional build, that just really expedited the time at which once we stepped foot on site with the containers, we would be, you know, basically in the dry a lot faster. With you guys fabricating these off site, while the site work was going on, there was a lot of really good coordination between the other fabrication shop that we could do all that and marry all those components up again before it got to the site. So once we stepped foot on site, it was stacking containers, attaching staircases, doing all the structural steel, a lot of the screening elements, all that came together at once, which saved a tremendous amount of time. And that really couldn't have been, you know, executed that way unless, you know, we were using containers and we were using, you know, we were able to fabricate kind of off-site while the site work was going on. This being our first time working with containers, you know, we were a little naive about certain things. And so I guess number one was, you know, my vision of storage containers previous, and I've seen projects before, but, you know, the overwhelming idea was that you see them stacked on ships coming across, you know, the ocean, and that these things are stacked, you know, however many high, you know, 10, 20 high by however many wide. And so I just assumed that structurally you could do anything you wanted to with them, right? That you could just stack these things in any configuration and it wasn't going to require a lot of, you know, structural support. Now, that is the case, I think, if you're stacking them perfectly straight on top of each other, aligned. But with our project, the pitch, you know, we had to, there was a lot of articulation in the containers. We bridged them, we cantilevered them, and we cut a bunch of holes in them, right? So that required just a structural element that I wasn't prepared for. And so, you know, that's something that going forward, you need to know is that, you know, depending on the amount of windows and doors and how you're going to use the containers, you got to think about how you're going to support these things. You know, the other thing about containers, really, you know, you can see the project on plan, you can see them in modeling, which we spent a lot of time with, but we didn't really dig into like, okay, how are we going to really run all the MEP throughout the containers? How are we going to run electrical, plumbing, HVAC, ventilation? And so granted, we had an MEP engineer that did a great job on the project, but we didn't spend the time to really visualize, like, what was it going to mean to run a 12-inch by 18-inch duct through the top of a container for, again, a kitchen application, let's say. And then if you've got to make a turn and you've got to turn and go up into the second level containers, like, what was all that going to entail? How was that going to encroach on space? How are you going to hang it, right? In terms of electrical, it's like, how are we going to route, you know, electrical and plumbing if it had to be in wall or above ceiling? Because most of the time, right, if you're in a conventional build, and say a strip center or an office building or whatever it is, you've got more than enough space kind of above your head to do all that. Where a container, you're very confined, right? You've got 9 feet to the bottom of the underside, let's say. And then if you've got any kind of ceiling element, right, you've got a really tight tolerance for running MEP. And so that's one thing that I would do differently next time is really kind of dig into the programming of that, really work closely with the MEP team, with all the trades, kind of ahead of getting into construction so that we can really walk through and understand how we're going to execute all that. the other thing I would recommend to any other contractor working with containers, and this is really, now and for the next maybe few months, is, getting with your local municipality and really sitting down with them and talking through what the project is. Now, containers and just modular as a whole, that type of construction is really being adopted, nationwide. I think you're going to find where you're going to run into municipalities that this type of construction doesn't check the box for certain reviewers, planners, inspectors. And again, I think we were very fortunate in working here with the city of Austin on the pitch project, where we did bring the city in early on and talk through all this, but we still had the occasional inspector that would come out to inspect something or look at something, and it didn't look like a conventional project. So they kind of had to scratch their head a little bit and go back and maybe ask team members and get some recommendations. So again, the city of Austin partnered really, really well with us on the project, but I think we could have avoided, a little bit of confusion and saved some time had we really sat down with that team as much as you can, right, with certain municipalities, to talk through kind of what, programmatically we were doing with the containers and what was going to happen. Having everybody at the table that's going to be part of the project as early as possible made the project, go, way faster. We avoided a lot of problems. Again, for this being a one-of-a-kind project, for a lot of people working on it, I think we were fortunate that we were allowed to get everybody involved early on and really start that communication early. And we pushed it hard all the way through. And, I think everybody would agree that really contributed to a successful project. So just, like you should on every project, is foster a high level of communication and collaboration with your team.